Sylvester Stallone remained in full costume from the film set, portraying the image of an aged, weary man. And as fate would have it, the inevitable occurred when he crossed paths with two patrolling police officers. Before we begin, don't forget to like and follow for more powerful stories that will stay with you. Now let's begin. It was one of those late afternoons in New York City, when the skyline glowed gold, and the wind carried the scent of warm pretzels and spring grass. Central Park was alive with a kind of quiet energy. Couples walking hand in hand, parents pushing strollers, an old man feeding pigeons near the Bow Bridge. On a bench just west of Bethesda Fountain, an elderly-looking man sat alone. His coat, patched and faded, hung loosely over his shoulders. His scuffed boots peeked out beneath a pair of worn jeans. A weathered Yankees cap shaded his eyes. Beside him, resting quietly, was a brown paper bag, sagging slightly from the weight of what was likely a simple sandwich. He kept to himself, chewing slowly, watching squirrels dart across the gravel path like little messengers of mischief. Passers-by paid him no mind. To them, he was just another homeless man seeking peace among the trees. But appearances are often lies dressed in truth. The man on the bench was no drifter. He was Sylvester Stallone, hours removed from a film set on the Upper West Side, still in full makeup and costume for a role that had aged him 20 years and stripped away the glamour of his name. He had played a forgotten war veteran, hardened by life, softened only by silence. The scene had been emotionally heavy. Instead of heading back to the trailer, he took a walk. Something about staying in character a little longer felt necessary. Something in him needed to breathe where no one knew his name. He sat without expectation. He sat to feel the quiet. But in doing so, he had unknowingly stepped into a scene more real than any script he'd ever read. At 5:47 p.m., a patrol car cruised into the lot near the Loeb Boathouse. Two officers stepped out. Officer David Martin was young, clean-shaven, and sharp around the edges, the kind of officer who still had something to prove. His partner, Officer Richard Alvarez, was a decade older, his uniform creased at the elbows, his eyes lined with the fatigue of too many double shifts. Martin spotted Stallone almost immediately. "Another vagrant," he muttered, adjusting his duty belt. "This park's starting to look like a shelter." Alvarez glanced in the same direction. "Let's not jump the gun. Could be anyone," he replied. "Could be someone's granddad." They walked toward the bench with slow, deliberate steps. Stallone, in full performance, didn't move. He kept his shoulders hunched and eyes lowered, the picture of resignation. "Sir," Martin said curtly, "you can't just hang out here all day. This isn't a personal living room." Stallone looked up, his expression unreadable beneath the shadows cast by his cap. "I'm not bothering anyone," he replied, voice low and steady. "Just sitting, just breathing." Martin stepped forward, arms crossed, stance firm. "That's not the point. People like you make others uncomfortable." He didn't say it, but the implication hung in the air. "Do you have ID?" Stallone reached into his coat pocket with slow, deliberate movements and retrieved a well-worn wallet. Inside was a state ID for one Robert Sylvester, the alias production used for offset documentation. Martin examined it, frowning. The face looked familiar, but distorted by age makeup. The address was a storage facility in Queens rented by the studio. "This looks fake," Martin said flatly. "Where do you live?" Stallone smiled faintly. "Right now? Here. Yesterday? A soundstage on 63rd Street. Tomorrow? Maybe the Bronx." Alvarez shifted his weight uncomfortably. He looked down at the sandwich Stallone had left untouched. "You just finished working?" he asked. "Yes," Stallone said. "Figured I'd enjoy the park before heading back to nowhere." Martin wasn't buying it. "What kind of work brings you here looking like this?" Stallone raised his sandwich slightly. "Method acting," he said dryly, then took a bite. A woman walking her Labrador paused nearby. "Is he in trouble?" she asked. "Because he's been sitting there for an hour, and I haven't seen him do a thing." Martin replied quickly, "Ma'am, this is police business. Please, move along." She frowned. "This is a public park. That means he has just as much right to sit here as anyone else." Stallone gave a polite nod, chewing slowly, watching the exchange unfold like it was someone else's story. Martin's eyes darkened. "Listen," he said, stepping closer. "You're not under arrest, but you're not welcome here either. This park is for families, tourists, not for loitering." Stallone swallowed. "So you're telling me where I can and can't rest based on how I look?" "Don't twist my words," Martin snapped. Alvarez raised a hand. "Let it go, Dave. He's not doing anything wrong." "Not yet," Martin muttered under his breath, but Stallone caught it. Their eyes locked for a moment, not with rage, but with something deeper. A test. A challenge. Then, just like that, Stallone broke the silence. "You know," he said, brushing a crumb from his coat, "you didn't even ask me what I did before assuming I don't belong here. You didn't wonder if maybe I had a family, a job, a story." Martin stiffened. "I don't need a story. I need facts." "Then here's one," Stallone said. "You're treating me differently because you think I'm invisible, but you're the one who's not seeing." Alvarez turned away, rubbing the back of his neck. "Let's move," he said again, more firmly. Martin hesitated, then took a slow step back. "This isn't over," he said, almost like a warning. Stallone didn't flinch. "It never is," he said quietly. "But I've got time." The officers walked away, disappearing past a row of trees. The tension they left behind lingered like a fog over the bench. Stallone leaned back, exhaled, and took another bite of his sandwich. A jogger slowed as he passed, his eyes darting toward the man on the bench, then away again. Stallone remained still, a character in his own silent film. The scene had shifted, and the performance was only beginning. The sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting a soft amber glow across the park as the shadows lengthened, like fingers stretching across the earth. Sylvester remained on the bench, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. His sandwich was nearly finished now, the last bite wrapped carefully in the wax paper, set aside next to the crumpled paper bag. He sat like a monument to stillness, his expression unreadable but alert beneath the disguise. A couple of joggers approached along the gravel path, both in their early 50s, well dressed in coordinated running gear. The man wore a smart fitness tracker on his wrist, his pace steady and deliberate, while the woman's eyes flicked nervously toward Stallone as they passed. "You think he's dangerous?" she murmured under her breath, her voice just loud enough to carry. "Maybe we should call someone." The man beside her gave a subtle nod, and they quickened their steps without another word, their shoes crunching away down the path as Stallone closed his eyes again, absorbing the moment like an actor waiting for his cue. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then came the teenagers. 4 of them on bikes, their laughter too loud for the setting, their presence marked by a kind of restless, youthful arrogance. One of them, a boy with curly hair and a too large hoodie, slowed his bike as he spotted Stallone on the bench. "Hey, check this out," he called to his friends, nodding in Stallone's direction. "Another bum. Look at this guy." The others skidded to a stop, circling like vultures around a sleeping giant. "Yo, old man," one of them shouted. "You lose your bench in Times Square or what?" The boys laughed. One pulled out his phone, holding it up like a weapon. "Come on, say something," he taunted. "We'll put you on TikTok. You might get famous." Stallone opened his eyes slowly, meeting the boy's gaze with a calmness that did not match the situation. He didn't yell. He didn't flinch. He simply said, "You should move along." The voice was even, grounded, and something in it made the laughter falter. The boys hesitated for a beat, as if they could feel the shift in the air, but didn't understand why. Then the sound of an approaching engine broke the silence. A police cruiser again. The same one. The teenagers scattered in a blur of motion, their bikes spinning off down the hill as gravel sprayed in their wake. Martin stepped out before the car had even rolled to a full stop. Alvarez followed, his face drawn tighter than before. "You again," Martin muttered, walking towards Stallone with the same puffed-up energy he had worn earlier, though now it was laced with something closer to frustration than authority. "Didn't get the message the first time." Stallone didn't move. "Did they pass a law against sitting?" he asked, his tone light, almost casual. "Because I missed that one." "You've got a smart mouth," Martin replied, jaw tight. "I don't like smart mouths." "Good thing I'm not here to make friends," Stallone said, shifting slightly to lean back on the bench. Alvarez sighed, rubbing the back of his neck again, clearly not eager for round two. "What's going on here, Dave?" he asked, voice low but edged with warning. "Why are we doing this again?" Martin didn't answer directly. He kept his eyes locked on Stallone. "He's up to something. I know it." "He's sitting on a bench," Alvarez said. "You gonna book him for public peace?" Martin ignored the remark and stepped in closer. "What's in the bag?" he demanded. Stallone tilted his head slightly, the movement deliberate, slow. "Lunch," he said plainly. "Prove it." With a calmness that had clearly begun to unnerve even Alvarez, Stallone lifted the bag and opened it, revealing exactly what he claimed: a half-eaten sandwich, an apple, a small bottle of water. Martin frowned, but didn't back off. "You hiding anything else?" "Only from people who think I don't belong here," Stallone answered, voice calm, eyes steady. There was a moment of silence between them, thick and taut. Then Martin crossed his arms, stepping back half a foot. "You act like you've got nothing to lose," he said, eyes narrowing. "You act like this doesn't scare you." "Should it?" Stallone asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because last I checked, existing isn't illegal." "You're playing us," Martin shot back. "I can feel it." "Then maybe that says more about you than me," Stallone replied, not unkindly, but with a firmness that stopped Martin cold. Alvarez stepped forward again, clearly trying to de-escalate the rising temperature. "He's clean," he said. "We checked the ID, the bag. He hasn't caused a scene. Let's move on." But Martin wasn't finished. He reached for his radio and pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12, requesting a records check on a Robert Sylvester. ID provided earlier." A pause, followed by the crackle of static. "Copy that, Unit 12, came the dispatcher's voice. "Stand by." Stallone leaned back slightly. "You're relentless," he said, not angry, just observing. "You think this is clever?" Martin snapped. "You think this is some game?" Before Stallone could respond, the radio crackled again. "Unit 12, No record found for Robert Sylvester matching the provided ID. Could be a false document or a database error. Martin stiffened, turning the radio off with a sharp click. "I knew it," he said under his breath. "Fake ID, knew it." "Or, your system's out of date," Stallone replied. "Happens more often than people admit." "Don't play smart with me," Martin growled. "You're not who you say you are." "I never said who I was," Stallone answered quietly. "You assumed." Alvarez stepped between them again. "That's enough," he said firmly. "This is going too far." "He's hiding something," Martin insisted. "He has to be." "He's hiding a sandwich and a calm attitude," Alvarez said flatly. "And that's not illegal." Martin's eyes never left Stallone. "You think you're better than us?" "No," Stallone said, still seated, still composed. "But I do think I've seen enough to know when someone's making a mistake they'll regret." Alvarez reached for Martin's shoulder, his grip tight. "Let's go," he said, eyes hard. "Before this turns into something it doesn't have to be." Martin hesitated. His jaw was clenched, his face flushed. Then, with one last glare, he turned on his heel and walked back to the cruiser. Alvarez followed, slower, casting one final glance at the man on the bench. Stallone watched them disappear around the bend. He didn't move for a long time. The breeze picked up again, rustling the leaves above his head. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, sleek black smartphone. He turned it in his hand slowly, thoughtfully, then unlocked the screen. On it was a red timer, blinking. The live stream had been running since the moment he sat down. Every word, every look, every threat. It had all been recorded and broadcasted to the world, not because he wanted revenge, not because he sought drama, but because sometimes the only way to reveal a truth is to hold up a mirror and let it reflect. And from the look in Officer Martin's eyes before he left, Stallone knew this mirror had done exactly that. The sun had already begun its slow descent behind the west side skyline, casting the last strands of daylight across the lawn like faded brush strokes on an old canvas. Sylvester Stallone remained seated on the bench, quiet and composed, the phone now tucked back into the inner pocket of his coat, its screen still warm from recording. Around him, the breeze carried the voices of evening strollers and cyclists passing by, unaware of the firestorm that had quietly been ignited on their screens. Online, the live stream had gained traction. At first, just a few curious viewers, then hundreds, then thousands. By now, the comments section was flooded, some people shocked by the way the officers had behaved, others praising Stallone's remarkable calm, and some, of course, questioned everything because the internet is never short on doubt. But it didn't matter. The moment had happened. The camera had caught it. And it was real. Just as Stallone leaned back, closing his eyes for a rare moment of reflection, he heard the familiar sound of gravel crunching under boot soles. He opened his eyes to see the cruiser again, pulling up faster this time. Officer Martin stepped out alone. No Alvarez. The absence was telling. Martin looked more agitated than ever, shoulders hunched, lips pressed tight. He moved with purpose now, not protocol. A man no longer looking for order, but for resolution. He stalked forward, stopping just feet from the bench. "You've got some nerve," he muttered, eyes burning, voice like a kettle about to boil. "Sitting here like you own the place." Stallone didn't respond immediately. He tilted his head slightly, then said in a voice that remained even and anchored, "It's a public park. Nobody owns it." "You know what I mean," Martin snapped. You've been playing games with me all day, acting like you're better, mocking me." "I haven't mocked anyone," Stallone replied. "I've answered your questions, sat still, ate lunch. You're the one turning this into something else." Martin clenched his jaw, his hand twitching near his utility belt. "Tell me who you really are," he demanded. "Right now. I'm done playing." Stallone looked up, the soft lines of prosthetic makeup still masking his true features. But his eyes, those unmistakable, steely, storied eyes, held a glint of something that went beyond the character he'd been playing all day. Without raising his voice, he said, "You really want to know who I am?" Martin didn't answer. He didn't need to. His posture screamed yes. Slowly, deliberately, Stallone reached into his coat, not fast, not threatening, and pulled out the phone again. He tapped the screen, turned it toward Martin. The officer leaned in, suspicious at first, then confused, then stunned. The screen showed a crisp image. Martin himself, captured from earlier that day, standing over the man on the bench, voice sharp, attitude harder. The sound played, too, crystal clear. Everything he'd said, every look, every accusation. "What is this?" Martin asked, the heat rising in his face. "What the hell is this?" Stallone stood up slowly. For the first time, Martin realized just how tall and broad the man was, how his posture shifted from passive to powerful in an instant. "This," Stallone said, "is a live stream. It's been running all day, everything you said, everything you did, broadcast to the world." "That's entrapment," Martin barked, panic flashing across his features. "You can't do that. You have no right." "I didn't coerce you into anything," Stallone said calmly. "You made your choices. All I did was sit down and wait." "Wait for what?" Martin hissed. "To ruin my life? To ambush me?" "To hold up a mirror," Stallone answered. "To show people what happens when power forgets humility." At that moment, a sudden cluster of voices rose behind them. Reporters. At least 3 news vans had pulled up along the edge of the park. Word had spread fast. Camera crews were unloading equipment. Phones were already filming. And Captain Jane Monroe, head of NYPD Internal Affairs, had arrived. She strode through the crowd with measured authority, her heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks. Her badge gleamed at her hip. Her expression was unreadable but focused. She stopped in front of Martin and Stallone. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice sharp and controlled. Martin turned toward her. "He set me up," he said, pointing at Stallone. "He's not who he said he was. He's been filming me. It's a trap." Monroe didn't respond to him. She turned to Stallone, eyes scanning his face. He pulled off the Yankees cap, then slowly peeled back a section of the prosthetic beard. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was enough. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "It's him." "That's Stallone." Monroe's jaw tightened. "Mr. Stallone," she said, nodding once. "I've just reviewed the footage. It's already circulating. I don't think we need any more clarification." Martin stood in stunned silence. "You're suspending me?" he asked, voice cracking. "You can't do that. This wasn't. "Hand over your badge and your weapon," Monroe said, her voice steady as steel. "You're on administrative leave pending a full investigation." Martin looked around, as if searching for a lifeline, but found only flashing cameras and the eyes of 100 strangers watching his fall. His hand trembled as he unclipped the badge from his chest, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. He handed it over without a word. Monroe turned back to Stallone. "On behalf of the department, I apologize for the treatment you received. This is not who we are." Stallone shook his head. "But it is who we sometimes become, and it needs to be seen." The cameras followed his every move as he stepped away from the bench. But before leaving, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded note. Quietly, he bent down and slid it beneath the wooden slats of the bench. Then he turned, walking past the crews, past the stairs, until he reached the black SUV that had been idling on the curb. The driver opened the door. "Ready, sir?" Stallone paused, looked back one last time at the bench where it all began. "Not yet." He turned back, looking toward the small crowd that was still buzzing, still talking, still filming. The live stream had ended, but the story had just begun. A few hours later, that bench became a makeshift shrine. People came and left behind handwritten notes, flowers, small signs that read, "Dignity matters, and power is how you use it." One laminated message stood out among the rest. It read, in bold handwriting, "To the next person who sits here, your story matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The city moved on, as cities do, but not without remembering, not without feeling the weight of what had unfolded that day. On talk shows, at dinner tables, in barbershops and churches, people talked about what they saw, about what they assumed, about what they'd do differently now. As for Stallone, he returned to filming, but something in him had shifted. In an interview weeks later, he sat across from a veteran journalist and said simply, "Sometimes the greatest performance isn't on camera. It's the one that shows people what needs to change." The journalist nodded, then asked, "And do you think it changed anything?" Stallone looked into the camera, eyes steady. "It started a conversation. That's always the first step. And conversations lead to something bigger, if we're brave enough to listen."